Alien discs in China. Our first story really is something out of a sci-fi movie. In fact, for many experts and commentators, it's just that, a fictional account of a shocking archaeological discovery in China. No evidence exists concerning these strange artifacts known as the Dropa stones, but to this day, the ancient mystery endures. It all started in 1938, when a cave network was found by an archaeologist. Inside the caves, which appeared to have been specifically dug, were the remains of non-human life forms. Their skeletons may have been 3 feet tall, and they reportedly had noticeably large heads. So far, so little green men. But it was the discs that lay with them which generated the most intrigue. Numbering over 700 and dating back to around 10,000 BC, the Dropa stones were discs measuring a foot in width and featuring a hole in the middle. Now if that sounds like a vinyl record to you, guess what? The discs also had grooves which at one point were placed onto a record player. When the needle went down, energy was reportedly released. Within the grooves were symbols telling the supposed alien story. Apparently they weren't welcomed by humans at the time and murdered. The reason we in the worldwide community don't have the Dropa stones to examine for ourselves is that China put them under lock and key, though at one stage Russia took a look and concluded they were made from a combination of cobalt, iron, and nickel. It's a powerful mystery, we're sure you'll agree, and certainly unexplained. However, the unexplained part can be boiled down to the fact that it isn't very convincing on the evidence front. People with first-hand experience of the stones don't apparently exist, or maybe all record of them was erased by the aliens. Ooh, freaky.
Ocean giants. In 2017, footage was recorded that showed that a diver was in control of a remotely operated vehicle when he discovered one of the greatest mysteries of the ocean ever. At the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, sitting over 2,500 feet below sea level, he found the skeleton of an unidentified beast estimated at over 100 feet in length. The giant skeleton seems to be the remains of a mythical sea serpent. Not a single scientist has been able to identify the preposterously large skeleton, with most admitting it's nothing like anything that's ever been found before. The skeleton was spotted in the middle of a vast undersea community of tiny animals like crabs and shellfish. The man operating the underwater vehicle filmed what looked to be a spinal column lying in the muck at the bottom of the sea. The column is attached to some larger bones, but it's impossible to tell what they look like because it's so murky down there. The diver tried to use the claw mechanism on the craft to lift up one of the bones, but it crumbled to dust the moment it was touched by the metal. The problem now is that the skeleton can't be transported to the surface because it will literally disintegrate. There's no way to properly document it, to know how long the skeleton has been down there, or to find out just what kind of mysterious beast it once belonged to. Some speculate that it is the skeleton of a sea serpent, or perhaps a dinosaur from millions of years ago. That seems far-fetched, but no scientific explanation has solved this mystery so far.
An ancient murder. An ancient murder from over 4,000 years ago has finally been solved by archaeologists. The murder scene was first discovered in a Spanish cave. Researchers came across a group of skeletons from the late Neolithic period in 1999. The skeletons had clearly been murdered, then dumped deep inside the cave. 18 bodies were found here, along with 1,332 bone fragments. Using modern technology, scientists have finally come up with a cause of death. They know that there were 2 types of traumas exhibited by the skeletons: blunt force and sharp force. In other words, these people were brutally beaten and stabbed to death. Scientists have now identified the brutal murder weapon used in these killings. They believe the weapon was a large stone axe, likely sharpened to a point on one end so that it could be used for stabbing as well as beating. However, scientists are still looking for a motive for these barbarous killings. They blame interpersonal violence, but nobody knows what would have caused someone to go on a murder rampage with their trusty stone axe. Rongo writings. From a vague ancient mystery to a more realistic one, the Rongo writings of Rapa Nui, i.e. Easter Island, most definitely exist because we've actually seen them, which is a good start. We don't know a lot about this writing system, which can be found on tablets and also displayed on a wooden fish in the island's museum. There's more than one idea as to how Rongo Rongo got started, making things even more mysterious. Let's start by taking a look at the language itself, containing both human and animal shapes combined with other less understandable symbols. It represents the communications of a people whose habitation of the island was largely destroyed. When others discovered the remote beauty of Rapa Nui, they also brought with them new diseases and a desire to conquer and enslave. This meant that the population's sacred religious traditions were pushed aside. The giant stone heads, such a famous image worldwide, are a major indicator of a culture that is, on the whole, lost. As the 20th century dawned, a few people remained to tell their story. While their remembrances were recorded by some, it's only a small fraction of the culture left behind. New Zealand linguist Stephen Roger Fisher wrote a book on the subject. He believes the Rongo Rongo writings can be viewed through the prism of East Polynesia and its oral traditions. It's thought the first people to inhabit Rapa Nui came from that area. He refers to cosmogonies, which are origin stories of the universe and our natural world. Fisher believes the surviving examples of Rongo Rongo are part of this tradition. Furthermore, he theorizes that the symbols or glyphs are only part of the reading process, with long-established chants possibly providing more detail. It's a disputed view of Rongo Rongo, but nevertheless a fascinating one. Ultimately, the story is so elusive because we don't even know when Rapa Nui welcomed its first inhabitants. Did they land there as early as the year 800? And if they did they bring their writing system with them? Or might that have come later in response to later explorers and their own forms of communication? How will the mystery of Rongo Rongo be cracked? Artificial intelligence is being applied to the conundrum, but it's thought even modern technology will be stumped. It doesn't help that the original examples of Rongo Rongo were taken off the island, where they were created, of course.
The Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is, without a doubt, the most mysterious place in the ocean. At least, that is when it comes to missing vehicles and unidentified flying objects. According to legend, supernatural phenomena have been occurring here for centuries. There are stories of cancer patients being resurrected in the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, of strange underwater pyramids, and of ships and airplanes vanishing into thin air. But how much truth is there to the legend? Yes, over 50 ships and at least 20 aircraft have disappeared from the Bermuda Triangle. However, nobody has actually been resurrected. One of the most famous cases of mysterious vanishing was in December of 1945, when the US Navy's Flight 19 group, composed of 5 torpedo bombers, disappeared without a trace while passing through this area of the ocean. The weather got too bad, the plane pilots got disoriented, and the planes lost contact with the command center. The airplanes went down somewhere east of Florida. The military dispatched rescue, but even to this day, the wreckage has never been confirmed as found.
Bishop with a baby. Researchers at the Lund University Hospital in Sweden were shocked when they conducted a CT scan on a Scandinavian bishop from the year 1679 and discovered he had a tiny fetus tucked underneath his feet. Nobody knew just what to make of the bizarre discovery, as it's not every day that a mummified bishop's body would be found harboring a tiny, unborn child. But after years of mystery, researchers have finally made some progress. First, we need to know who this bishop was. His name was Peder Vinstrup, a prominent figure in Scandinavian history and one of the original fathers of Lund University. He was buried beneath a cathedral in Lund and became naturally mummified because of the plant material used to build his coffin. And because he had died over a long period of illness, by the time he was finally buried, he was practically a mummy anyway. But where did the fetus come from? It was obviously concealed beneath his feet on purpose. Researchers now know that there was a direct connection between the bishop and the child, and that the fetus may have been placed underneath his feet in secret by whoever organized his funeral. DNA evidence has shown that the fetus was probably the bishop's grandson. They shared 25% of their DNA. It's likely that the child's mother, after having a stillbirth, secreted the fetus into the coffin with the bishop in hopes that the child would be close to its grandfather in death. Costa Rican spheres. An extinct people called the Diquis lived in the Central American country of Costa Rica between AD 700 and 1530. While they had a great culture at the time, many hundreds of years have passed. This means we have to rely on the archaeological evidence they left behind, some of which is maybe a little on the strange side, at least through our eyes. These are petrospheres, or stone that has been hammered into a spherical shape before being smoothed. Phew, it makes us tired just thinking about it. Numbering over 300, they can be found on Caño Island in an area known as Diquis Delta. They were discovered, or rather they came to light after years of neglect by workers for a banana plantation, made from a type of rock called gabbro. The balls measure from just a foot to 6.6 feet in width. It's noted that they appear to have been placed in areas that were significant to the Diquis. Apart from that, the jury is very much out on what purpose they served. Were they intended to suggest status, or did they just look cool? An interesting detail is that in accounts from the 16th century, explorers didn't mention seeing stone balls in the territory. You'd think that kind of thing might get their attention, right? We only have a vague idea of when the petrospheres were made and when they were arranged. Experts trace the first spheres back to the year 600 or thereabouts. Throw in the fact that many of the spheres have been moved, and that makes things even more puzzling. Whatever the story, we think you'll agree that they make for a beautiful sight, with a lot of work going into their creation. Mysterious, yet awe-inspiring.
Cape Cod Sea Serpent. Something terrifying was recently spotted off the coast of Cape Cod. A potential sea serpent almost 1,000 feet long. People are always speculating about giant sea monsters living in our oceans, but it's rare to ever actually find one. The photograph of the sea monster was taken by an aerial photographer named Wayne Davis. He was flying over the Atlantic Ocean near the Nauset Beach dunes when he saw the shadow of the beast and snapped a few quick pics of it. He had never seen anything like it in his life, though he did admit it kind of reminded him of a Chinese dragon. It was extraordinarily long. It seemed to have a tail much longer than its body, and it moved through the ocean like a snake. The big problem now is trying to figure out what the creature really was. Could it have been a truly gigantic sea beast that scientists don't know about? Or on the other hand, was it simply a shadow on the water that looked like a sea monster? Skeptics say one thing, true believers say something else, and the truth is hard to pin down.
The mysterious unicorn. A new fossil discovery has shed some light on the mythical unicorn. While most of us believe white horses with horns growing out of their foreheads are just myths, the truth is that they may have actually been inspired by real unicorn creatures. This fossil was discovered in Kazakhstan, belonging to a prehistoric animal with a single horn that walked across our planet at the same time as humans. It dates back 29,000 years to before modern civilization, but to a time when human beings were still communicating with one another. Scientists have called it the Elasmotherium sibiricum, or the Siberian unicorn for short. The creature is closely related to a rhinoceros, but its horn was significantly longer. Scientists say its horn could have been several feet long, and while it wasn't a magical white stallion that could shoot rainbows, it likely fascinated our ancient ancestors enough that they told stories about the Siberian unicorn. Those amazing stories have made it all the way to us in modern times. The Emerald Tablet. Remember how we talked about alien discs at the start of this video, and how there was no physical evidence to back up claims concerning these mysterious items? Well, our next choice arguably puts that story in the shade. Was there really a green emerald tablet bearing symbols and inscriptions that, once understood, could transform humankind's understanding of life, the universe, and everything? Sounds like a fanciful concept, though the amount of famous names and places that are associated with the tablet, which is also referred to as the Smaragdin Tablet, is mind-boggling. By the way, Smaragdin is a word relating to all things emerald. It isn't the name of some wizard, though it certainly sounds like it, right? When it comes to the all-knowing Emerald Tablet, there are definitely more questions than answers. In fact, you might say it's all questions, making it one of history's ultimate mysteries. What was on this powerful and revealing hunk of emerald? Was there more than one? We're thinking if it revealed secrets of the universe, then you're not gonna fit all of that on one tablet. One idea is that the tablet was created in the 5th century by the ancient Greek philosopher/god figure Hermes Trismegistus. He was a pivotal figure in the field of alchemy, or turning matter into other stuff, such as metal into gold. However, it's also believed that he's an ancient legend from the time of the gods who never actually existed himself. So you can get bogged down trying to establish who the author was in the first place. Some think the Emerald Tablet was made in Greece, others Egypt. Atlantis is another possible source for this amazing artifact. As well as dealing with alchemy, the tablet enlightens readers on human consciousness, the power behind everything on planet Earth, and matter transmutation, basically transformation. According to records, it was translated into Latin back in the 12th century, and various notable figures have taken a look at it, including budding alchemist and human gravity detector Sir Isaac Newton. The Philosopher's Stone, which alchemists figure is the key to gold production, and so forth, may well have an entry on the Emerald Tablet. Is the tablet partly a guide to making your very own stone? At the time of recording, we'll never know, because we don't have it to study for ourselves. Now, if you'll excuse us for a sec, this elaborate story has given us a headache. Think we might need to take a, you guessed it, tablet.
The Mariana Trench. The Mariana Trench is the deepest place in the world. It's located just off the coast of Guam, known to be one of the most unique environments on the planet. It goes down to a depth of over 36,000 feet, hosting some very bizarre sea creatures at the very bottom. The creatures who live at the bottom of the trench have adapted to living at pressures over 1,000 times more than what we experience on land. There are mud volcanoes, vents that spit out liquid sulfur, and who knows what else. It's true that in 2012, James Cameron descended to the bottom, or at least near the bottom, at 35,756 feet. However, he was only down there in a submarine for a handful of minutes. The Mariana Trench is over 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. So, as you can imagine, a few minutes at the bottom in one single spot with only one dim light of the submarine to locate sea creatures, well, they didn't really discover much. The truth is that nobody really knows what's at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Sure, they found some translucent sea cucumbers, kelp small organisms, and shrimp scavengers, but the true beasts of the trench have yet to be identified. What do you think lies at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? Tell me your ideas in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe if you haven't already for more amazing videos just like this one.
King Arthur's Court. Camelot was the place where King Arthur held court at his round table. Most of us accept the stories of King Arthur as legends, but others have taken the tales a little more seriously. Experts have been wondering for decades just how real Camelot and King Arthur really were. Was he a real king? Did Camelot really exist? Depending on which expert you ask, the mystery has actually been solved already. The primary contender for the real-life location of Camelot is Caerleon in South Wales. Two experts of British history, Geoffrey of Monmouth and Cotin de Troyes, have Camelot placed at this very spot. Back in the 5th century, this was one of 3 Roman forts still standing in Britain. To understand the significance of this a bit better, keep in mind that the Welsh people of today are descendants of the Roman Britons who were pushed out of what is now England by the Anglo-Saxon invaders in the 5th century. The few descendants of the old Roman settlers were forced across the border, right to where Caerleon is, and considering many historians believe King Arthur was a real leader of the Roman British people fighting against the invaders, it makes sense that he had used this place as his fortress. Through the years, Arthur and Camelot simply became more legendary than they really were. If Camelot truly did exist, it was almost certainly here at Caerleon. Stargate in Sri Lanka. You've heard of the TV shows and movies based around the concept of a Stargate. Well, here's the real-life version, or at least a rock carving, that's said to take people to strange and unknown places. It may date back to the First Kingdom of Sri Lanka, founded in 377 BC. Or it may not. No one knows when it was created. Of course, we can't vouch for this being an actual Stargate, but there are some intriguing details that just might suggest something cool and cosmic. Before we get into that, let's look at where the carving is located. You can find it in Sri Lanka, in the city of Anuradhapura, inside a huge park called Ranmasu Uyana. This translates as Golden Fish Park, and if you swim in the right direction, so to speak, you will spot this interesting feature on a rock face. As you can see, it has various symbols. The alleged rock stargate is packed with geometric detail, a series of concentric circles and rectangles with circles inside. Lines run across the carving, and there are representations of fish and other sea creatures around the outside. Meanwhile, people have also identified what they think are details such as weaponry and even an umbrella. What does it all mean? Experts and amateur detectives alike can't pin down the origin of the Stargate. Whilst the Buddhist monks of the area kept records on seemingly everything back then, this significant piece of rock isn't mentioned in their writings, which is kind of strange, right? Also, there are some seats carved into the rock opposite with the mysterious site, which is approximately 6 feet wide. Doesn't this suggest that you could sit there and study the Stargate, or could it just be an ancient version of a park bench? Who knows? Why are people so convinced it's a Stargate? Well, images depicted on the rock appear to be similar to those seen in other symbolic sites around the world. Though we should say nobody's managed to use these symbols to travel through the universe yet. Ultimately, it's believed the rock is a map, though whether it's of the cosmos or something else is anyone's guess.
The ocean floor. The ocean floor itself is almost as mysterious as the Mariana Trench, and is itself almost entirely unexplored. According to the United States National Ocean Service, humans have explored less than 20% of our ocean. That means that we have over 80% of the surface totally unknown to us. That's about half of the Earth's surface that we know next to nothing about directly. Considering how many wild and unbelievable things we've already found, just try to imagine what's hiding out in these uncharted places on the sea floor. We actually know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the floor of the ocean. Recently, scientists have begun using hydrographic surveys to map the ocean floor. Still, even with the most impressive modern technology, the coastal waters of the US have only been 35% mapped. That means there is a whole world of sunken ships, sea monsters, and geological features that we know nothing about, less than a mile from the American shoreline. If you want to explore the unknown, the ocean is a great place to start. What kind of mysteries do you think are still hiding on the floor of the ocean? Are there new species there that we've never discovered? Perhaps there are treasures that remain out there, waiting to be found someday.
Mystery of the Hermit King. For the past few centuries, archaeologists haven't paid much attention to a particular bizarre cave dwelling in Britain. To be honest, they thought it was an ornamental building made as a joke back in the 18th century. It wasn't until just recently that the mystery of the cave dwelling was solved. As it turns out, the cave really was used as a house. In fact, it was built for a mysterious hermit king after he was exiled and forced to live alone in the wilderness. And it wasn't in the 18th century. It was 1200 years ago. The mystery actually has two parts. There's the cave, then there's the legend of King Eardwulf of Northumbria. Legend says that the king was chased away from his throne for mysterious reasons in 806 AD, then banished to live in a cave for the rest of his life. He died in 830 AD and was buried 5 miles from the cave. It wasn't until now that archaeologists connected the cave and the story of King Eardwulf. Edmund Simmons, an archaeologist from the Royal Agricultural University, believes the king lived out his final days in the cave under the ever-present eyes of his enemies. It wasn't as great as being a king, but at least he had his own house. Devil's Bible. Now, this is not only ancient and unexplained, but also eerie. Believed to have been written in the 13th century, Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible, is billed as the biggest book produced in the Middle Ages found to date. To give you an idea of the size, it's an eye-straining 8.7 inches thick and weighs 165 pounds. By the way, in case you're wondering what Codex Gigas means, it translates as, giant book. Okay, that clears it up. Contrary to what the title suggests, it wasn't written by the devil. It's believed to have been put together by a Benedictine monk called Herman the Recluse, and spent centuries inside various monasteries. It was based at the Barum of Brotherhood between 1420 and 1594. At that point, King Rudolph II had a lend of it, which turned into a permanent loan. Well, we guess you can't say no to the king, right? During the 30 Years' War, it went to Sweden after their army raided the city. Why does it have the satanic title? This is due to a striking full-length portrait of the Prince of Darkness wearing an ermine loincloth. It forms half of a spread with a heavenly image opposite, which appears to be a cautionary move. warning folk of the dangers of the dark side. The pages, numbering 310, are made of donkey skin vellum, making the tome even more terrifying. Did the author sell their soul so they could complete this epic book in a night? Possibly. Though another theory is it took up to 3 decades. What else is inside the Codex Gigas? Well, it's composed of various texts by other authors, so it's actually an omnibus. The book includes the Bible, plus 1st century historical works by military man Flavius Josephus, among others. If you're brave enough, you can go and check out the book yourself at the National Library of Sweden.
The underwater city of Japan. Off the coast of Ryukyu Islands in Japan, one of the most mysterious things in the ocean has been captivating divers, geologists, scientists, and alien conspiracy theorists since it was discovered in 1987. The mystery revolves around a pyramid-like formation known as the Yonaguni Monument. It was uncovered by a diver 75 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. The pyramid is roughly 150 feet long and 60 feet wide, with most estimates placing it at least 10,000 years old. Nobody knows who built it. The Japanese government won't even admit that it's a man-made formation, and some scientists have gone so far as to denounce the discovery altogether as conspiracy nonsense. But anyone who's actually dove down to look at the pyramid knows it's no joke. It clearly has steps that were carved out of massive blocks of stone. Some divers even claim to have found the ruins of what might be an ancient city. No matter which way you look at it, there is something mystifying going on off the coast of Japan, and no mainstream scientists want anything to do with it. The best guess is that the pyramid was left behind by an ancient culture, while some more harebrained theories claim it could be the ruins of Atlantis.
Fire and brimstone. The ancient Middle Eastern city of Tal el-Hammam, as it's known today, was wiped out 3,600 years ago. Up until recently, nobody had really known what exactly happened to this ancient city. It looked as if it had been destroyed by a sudden earthquake or an exploding volcano, but there was just no way to tell what caused the abrupt deaths of everyone in the city, ruining the buildings and blanketing the town in fire. But now, the mystery has been solved. Experts in asteroid impacts stepped up to solve the case. They now believe that the ancient town was wiped out by a sudden asteroid strike, and that the event inspired the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The strike would have been similar to the one that killed the dinosaurs, just significantly smaller. The piece of spare rock probably exploded as a fireball 2.5 miles above the ancient city. Even though it didn't hit the city, the blast would have been 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima. Everyone in the city was blinded immediately. The air temperature rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit and the city was basically melted. At the same time, wind from the blast would have swept through the city streets of Jericho, 14 miles away. Experts believe that when the citizens of Jericho went to investigate the blast and found the entire city gone, as if snuffed out by a great god's fist, this is what inspired the story of the city of Sodom that eventually made its way into the Bible. Lizard overlords. If you want an answer to some of history's most unexplained mysteries, you might want to consider lizard people as the cause. Yes, we're going full-on conspiracy theory for our next entry. The idea that the most powerful and influential people in our society aren't so much people at all, but reptilian overlords. They've been on the planet for thousands of years, at least according to sports broadcaster turned New Age philosopher David Icke. He believes the lizard people, as they're dubbed by skeptics, arrive from the Alpha Draconis star system in the northern hemisphere. Not only are they shapeshifters, but they drink blood, making them tough to spot and also, we presume, dangerous. Although Icke was widely ridiculed for his statements on the lizard people, he isn't the first to talk about this general idea. Occultist Maurice Doreal mentioned lizard-like beings disguised as humans in a pamphlet published in the 1940s, and connections have been made to science fiction authors such as Robert E. Howard, who wrote about half-men, half-serpents who lived underground and could control folk with their minds. It's a handy catch-all theory to potentially explain the unexplainable throughout history. But the whole alien lizard man thing is kind of the academic equivalent of catching flies, right?
New sea animal. Paleontologists in Canada have discovered a new species of sea creature that looked like a football. The discovery goes to show just how mysterious life in our ocean is, and has been for the past 500 million years. This new species has been dated back 500 million years to the Cambrian period. It was identified in a piece of shale in the Kootenay National Park, up in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. But the real mystery isn't the fact that the sea fossil was found high up in the mountains, but that it was a literal giant for the time it was alive. According to Jean-Menard Caron, curator of invertebrate paleontology at the Royal Ontario Museum, the size of the creature is mind-boggling. It's one of the largest animals ever discovered from the Cambrian period. To give you a bit of a comparison, most sea creatures back then were roughly the size of your pinky finger. The football monster was almost 2 feet long, with a hard protective shell and a mouth filled with teeth. Oh, and don't forget the 2 spiky claws. It was a giant, over 10 times larger than just about every other creature. Paleontologists have no idea why the creature grew to such titanic sizes. They've since named it the Titanosaurus, and they say it's a type of ancient arthropod. But just how it came to be so big will probably remain a mystery.
How the pyramids were built. Archaeologists believe they have finally solved the mystery of how the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built. The mystery was solved thanks to a simple discovery, a ramp from 4,500 years ago. According to the researchers with the French Institute for Oriental Archaeology, as well as experts with the University of Liverpool, the ramp was used to move huge blocks of alabaster. These alabaster blocks were cut from the slopes of a quarry, then moved using the ramps. It was actually quite simple. On each side of the ramp would be a flight of stairs where huge wooden posts were positioned. The ramp then acted like a sled with ropes fixed to the wooden posts. Workers could pull the blocks up or down the ramp using the wooden poles, ropes, and the power of gravity. With this simple method, they would have been able to easily move heavy stones up large inclines, hence getting giant pieces of rock to the top of the pyramids with relative ease.
The mega shark. Some people believe there is an ancient mega shark lurking in the deepest parts of the world's oceans, and it might be a leftover megalodon from millions of years ago. It's one of the most intriguing ocean mysteries of our time. The issue is that scientists say the megalodon has been extinct for at least 3 million years. So the question becomes, could a predator more than 50 feet long still be lurking in our oceans without us knowing about it? Scientists say the answer is maybe. We know that very little of the ocean has ever been explored, but still, scientists say it's unlikely for a beast of that magnitude to go unnoticed by all the scientists on the planet. That being said, there are some strange discoveries that have suggested a megashark could still be alive. In 1875, the HMS Challenger picked up a huge set of 4-inch teeth from a depth of 14,000 feet off the coast of Tahiti. Then, in 1959, those teeth were estimated at only 11,300 years old. This would mean the megalodon didn't actually go extinct when scientists thought so. But unfortunately, nobody has actually seen a megashark in modern times, nor has a dead megashark body ever washed up on shore or been pulled up from the deep in a fisherman's net.
The origin of the Sarsen stones. Speaking of huge rocks, researchers believe they've also solved the mystery of where the Stonehenge building materials came from. The actual megalithic stones used in the construction of this ancient sanctuary are called Sarsen stones. Archaeologists were able to pinpoint the source of these stones about 15 miles away from Stonehenge. They did it by analyzing the chemical composition of the stones, then comparing their findings to the chemical composition of a crop of similar stones. The huge pieces of material, some of which weigh over 20 tons and stand over 21 feet tall, came from an area known as Marlborough Downs. Discovering the origin of the stones has only solved one part of the larger mystery though. Researchers still don't know what Stonehenge was used for exactly or how they carried the stones to the building site from 15 miles away. Maybe they used ramps similar to what the ancient Egyptians had, but that mystery is still being investigated. What do you think it was used for? Let us know in the comments below.
The immortal jellyfish. There are immortal jellyfish swimming in our oceans. As crazy as that sounds, it's absolutely true. The jellyfish has a kind of Benjamin Button syndrome, where it manages to age in reverse so that it never dies. The mystery of the immortal jellyfish, if ever solved, could one day not only eradicate cancer, but maybe even keep humans living longer than ever imagined. Here's what scientists know so far about the immortal jellyfish. It's only the size of a pinky fingernail. It was discovered in the Mediterranean Sea back in the 1880s, and scientists only figured out its uncanny ability about 20 years ago. The jellyfish has a pretty boring life, for as long as it goes on. It cheats death by transforming its cells to a previous younger state. According to Maria Pia Miglietta, a researcher from the Pennsylvania State University, it transforms its cells whenever threatened by starvation, physical harm, or some other kind of crisis. When it feels death is close, it literally changes its cellular structure so that it becomes younger. It reverts back to its original stage in jellyfish life, then grows old again. In this way, the jellyfish can, theoretically, grow old, turn back into a young creature, and grow old again, forever and ever. As for why humans don't do that, well, we just aren't sure. Maybe someday we'll be able to do just that.
The Kennewick Man. The identity of the Kennewick Man has finally been solved. The mystery was ongoing for almost 2 decades, ever since a pair of youngsters stumbled upon a human skull inside the Columbian River in Kennewick, Washington. What first seemed to be the head of a murder victim turned into one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. Here's why the skull was such a mystery. It had very unusual characteristics, so unusual that nobody could figure out where the man came from or why he was there. Scientists were divided, some believing he came from Japan and others saying he was Polynesian. There were even some that claimed Europe as a point of origin, but the skull was found to be 9,500 years old, so none of these theories were readily accepted. But thanks to dedicated archaeologists like James Chatters, who was involved with the discovery, we now know exactly where the Kennewick Man came from. The experts used DNA sequencing to reveal that he was a Native American. This honestly makes the most sense, as anything else would have drastically changed what we know about North American history. However, researchers still don't know why he had such unusual features. They've actually managed to reconstruct his face based on his skull, and despite having Native American blood, he didn't look anything like a Native American. He must have seemed like an alien to his own people, born with totally different features than everyone else around him. Or maybe he was an alien. The Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism has been a mystery to scientists ever since it was discovered at the bottom of the sea by sponge divers in the year 1901. The mechanism had been on a merchant ship that sank off the coast of Greece 2,000 years ago. When the sponge divers found the ship, they looted as much treasure from it as possible. The most bizarre relic was the Antikythera mechanism, which has gained significant fame in modern times because it looks like it came from an ancient computer. People have speculated that this rusty green piece of metal was once part of a larger, more complex computer developed by either incredibly intelligent ancient people or aliens. But the mystery of the mechanism has finally been solved. Because so much of the mechanism was missing, it was a lot of work piecing it back together again to recreate what it used to look like. But engineering experts from University College London have now built a working replica of the actual machine that the mechanism broke apart from. According to Adam Wojcik, one of the scientists working on the project, the mechanism was just a simple calendar. Well, maybe not that simple. The mechanism tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and 5 planets. However, the mechanism's designers assumed that these objects revolve around the Earth, so their movements are far from correct. Basically, the mechanism was just a fancy astrological calendar, similar to a modern watch. Are there any ancient mysteries you're still waiting for scientists to solve? Let us know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit subscribe, and don't forget to come back for another awesome video. See you next time, bye!